Hi, it's Rachel White here with the Horizon League, checking in with Suzanne Fong. We're going to talk about the Bobby Fong Award, which was named after Suzanne's late husband, who was the president at Butler University for about 10 years while they were in the Horizon League. So Suzanne, can you just start by talking a little bit about Bobby and kind of why he wanted to get into higher education in the first place?
Oh goodness, that that goes back a long time. Um, I think he felt he initially wanted to be a doctor when he started at Harvard. He was the son of what we would of undocumented immigrants. They separately fled communism and Japanese and came to this country, but this country at the time forbade all immigration from China. It was illegal, so they worked in Chinatown in different ways. His dad died when he was 2. He became a Christian when he was 6. At a missionary talked to him in Chinatown. So church became very important and school became very important. He went through public school his entire life, was considered somewhat backwards because he started knowing no English um, till he was 5. He started to learn English in kindergarten. Public education got him to the point, he worked very hard, but it got him to the point where he was able to get a full scholarship to Harvard. He wasn't that much of an athlete because he was working so hard at other things. He got very involved in the student body, but he was extremely proud of being an American citizen. He was deeply committed to the notion that education was the doorway to succeeding. Loved his time at Harvard, rode crew. Well, actually, for about 6 months, he was the captain of the freshman, or the cox of the freshman crew team, the coxswain, and enjoyed that. But other than that, wasn't really involved in athletics. However, as he began to wonder what he wanted to do, he sort of started out thinking he'd be a missionary doctor. Then he hit organic chemistry and found out this was not going to happen because his brain, which was a very, very good brain, could not get around organic chemistry for whatever reason. He became an English major and discovered that he loved the process of teaching people to communicate through English, teaching people to think critically, teaching people to really empathize with other kinds of characters. And he fell in love with that. He fell in love with the teaching. And he was also very actively involved in Harvard's Christian Fellowship and really loved working with people on trying to understand scriptures, how they applied, and it all sort of came together to him. So he applied to be a professor of English, to do graduate school in English, got into a program at UCLA, all on scholarship because he didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. Got through that, got his first job at Berea, and just fell in love with the process of working with kids. He got into administration largely because he began to see that shaping a curriculum, shaping what kids studied, could help shape the way they approach their education, could shape their thinking, their characters. He felt that simply leaving students to totally choose everything tended to not be the best way of going about it just because you're 18. And you don't necessarily know what you need to study, and he really wanted to help. He thought that higher education should ground kids and help them explore who they were as well as what they wanted to do, that it should be character exploration and training, values exploration and training, as well as and spiritual exploration and training, as well as vocational exploration and training. So that caused him to get into the administrative end where he could have a voice in those bigger picture items, and he kind of just kept working his way up until he hit the ceiling, which was the presidency of Butler.
Awesome. And you touched on it just a little from his time at Harvard, but can you talk about sort of his passion for athletics and being involved with sports?
He was much more of a fan than an athlete. I mean, he didn't have time to really develop it. He had, our younger son became an NCAA championship runner, so he was passionate about that. But what got Bobby interested in American sports, part of his Americanization and his falling in love with being an American citizen, which he was born here, was when he was about 8. All of his friends who were had been here longer were collecting baseball cards and talking about baseball. And this was the mid-60s, so it was a golden age for, say, the New York Yankees. And he sort of started saying, well, what's this all about? And at that time, I don't think his family owned a TV, but they had a radio. And his friends were talking about baseball cards. And of course, you were playing baseball after school. And so he got really interested in baseball. And like he did with everything, he overachieved. He fell in love with the Yankees. He liked the gamesmanship of the sport. He liked the strategy. He loved the athleticism. He liked the stories. He always thought sports was as much about people interacting and following rules and trying new ways of doing things. So all those things just made him passionate about baseball. He didn't really have a lot of interaction with sports on the college level, aside from being the coxswain of the freshman crew at Harvard, which was funny because he couldn't swim, so he had to wear a life jacket in the cox boat, which was awkward. He was the cox of the heavyweight crew, so it was this 110-pound Chinese kid and these 6 feet 2 inch preppies who weighed probably 200 and he had to boss them around, which he could do. But when he got to Butler, all of a sudden there was basketball. Now he liked football, he liked basketball, but these were new worlds to explore. And so in his typical way, especially with basketball, he became fascinated with the strategy of it. He fell in love with the speed of it, which is about as far away as you can get from baseball, and he became very interested in he was always interested in the numbers of baseball. He was fascinated by the whole Moneyball approach to baseball, so he was very curious about statistics in basketball, and he loved talking to Brad Stevens about that when Coach Stevens was at Butler, because that Coach Stevens was somebody who was really interested in applying the Moneyball idea to basketball and figuring out those metrics. So I don't know if that answers your question, but he became aware too, all through his college career, that sports could be one of the ways that students could be engaged outside the classroom in learning about themselves, challenging themselves, and learning life lessons. And he really liked both the achievement of it, the fun of it, and just the learning that could be done through sports. He saw them as an integral part of higher education.
Awesome. And obviously, we give out the award in Bobby's honor to someone that embodies our core values of integrity, respect, and stewardship. How do you think those values were really present in Bobby?
They were the essence of him. He, as somebody who came from a very humble background, the thing he treasured most, I think, about being an American and about higher education as he experienced it, was that it was a great equalizer. Anybody could move ahead if they could simply work hard. At the time he was in education, you really did have to work for your grades. There weren't a lot of A's and B's. But as an Asian kid, he knew if he studied, he could get there. And he treasured that. He thought that the essence of education, of government, was essentially having rules that work the same way for everybody all the time. Now, sports does that at its best. When you're, we won't go into how many times we thought the refs were blind when we were watching Butler basketball, but they got blind on the other side. And so, but the point, he loved sports because he thought that was one of the ways you could really learn those lessons about everybody playing on a level playing field and playing fairly. He just believed that everybody, he himself needed to obey the rules that everybody else obeyed. That was kind of the essence of his integrity. And he worked very hard to hold himself to a high standard, to be very truthful, to be very honest, even when he had to give bad news, and then to be very supportive in the way he could. Let's see, what are the other ones? That's integrity.
Respect and stewardship.
Respect and stewardship. Well, respect kind of goes with that. Integrity, respect are closely related.
Yeah.
Because if you respect someone, you want to treat them with integrity. And again, as somebody who came from a very humble background, he became somebody who, was on TV a lot, got to say a lot of things, got to lead a lot of people, but he always was deeply aware that it was due to people having put him in that position, and that he had to both earn their respect and show them respect. He also understood that the quality and virtue of a place like Butler was dependent on everybody who worked there. And he would often say to his faculty, who sometimes could be a little abrupt with their staff, look, you're the fighter pilots. You're the ones out there really working with kids and teaching them. But we are your support staff. And your airplane doesn't fly if your mechanics aren't doing their job. So he really made it a point to say, even to his janitors and the people who cleaned and the people who just ran errands and messages, you're integral. You keep an eye out for kids. Your fruit servers can often catch an eating disorder before anybody else does in the dorms. And so he tried to inculcate an understanding in his organization, in his staff, in the sports, the assistants, the ones who get the publicity out or who get your crowds to cheer you on, that everybody respected everybody else. And that came from his childhood of recognizing that he was respected, even though he was just this little immigrant Chinese kid.
Great.
Let's see, stewardship. Well, he understood that any kind of, the colleges and universities are essentially charitable. They work on donations of people and, of course, tuition, but your tuition doesn't begin to pay the cost of everything. And he recognized that every penny he spent, he had to earn either through encouraging students to come there or through donations. So he recognized that this was other people's money he was spending, and he needed to be deeply responsible with it. And he encouraged other people to think that way as well.
Great. This year's winner, Alissa Fisher, I know you had the opportunity to sort of read over some of the things that she'd done to earn the award. How did you see her as kind of embodying those same kind of qualities you just mentioned?
Well, she was certainly a good steward of her time, which is something I didn't mention, but goodness, what she has accomplished. Well, what all of you accomplish, you guys. You will do so much more than even Bobby and I remember doing at our age. But she seemed to be someone who especially was anxious to make everybody around her better in different ways. And more than that, to model a kind of a servant leadership, a way of encouraging other people around her to support each other, care for each other, and showing them how to do it, providing avenues for them to do it. That was very impressive to me.
Awesome. And then I just have one more question for you. What does it mean to you and your family to have this award presented annually and to remember Bobby in this way?
It's deeply. It's a great honor for him. I can't say he would have been quite a little embarrassed by it. He never thought of himself as being particularly special. We all knew he was. But he, for us, it's just every year when we get the memo from you all, and that tells us who the new person is, it just reminds us of how loved Bobby was by so many people. And he would especially be honored to have it be a sports award because he was in awe of athletes, because he knew he wasn't one. So so I always copy my sons, and we all tear up a little bit because we wish he were here. But it's Bobby did worry about not being remembered, and every year when this comes around, we know he's remembered, and that's really special to us.